tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to this last meeting of the Dunedin City Council for this term. Welcome to councillors, to staff, to the public and to the media. We will open today's meeting with a kia from Makura Elson.
He karake mō tātou. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tai. Kia mā kiniki ki te, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi anga, he te ata kura. E tio ki huka, hau hu, te i maurura, Thank you very much.
Councillors, there's no public forum on this occasion. And we move on to apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Newell. I'll move from the chair that we accept the apology from Councillor Newell. Second to Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. On to confirmation of the agenda. I'll move that the Council confirms the agenda with the following alterations in regard to Standing Order 2.1 Option C be adopted in relation to moving and seconding and speaking to amendments, and that Item 8, the DCC submission Essential Fresh Water Action for Healthy Waterways, will be withdrawn from the agenda, and you'll have all received an email explaining why that has been done. I'll move that. Second to Councillor Staines. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. On to item 5, declarations of interest. Are there any changes to the interest register? I didn't think there would be at this stage, so I'll move that Council notes the elected members' interest register attached as Attachment A, confirms the proposed management plan for elected members' interests, and notes the executive leadership team's interest register attached as Attachment B. Second to Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 6, confirmation of minutes. I'll move that the Council confirms the public part of the minutes of the ordinary Council meeting held on the 1st of October 2019 as a correct record. Second to Councillor Staines. Any discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. On to the report proper in this instance. The Dunedin City Council Annual Report for the year ended 30th of June. Can I invite Mr Toombs, Mr Logie and Mr Tan to join us up here to speak to the report if necessary. Welcome, gentlemen. Now, as usual, I'll ask if you wish to introduce this at all, or do you wish to go straight to questions? Say a few words. Fire
Just
away.
very briefly, a key part of the annual report, as you all know, are the financial statements. There's been no real changes from the versions that were shown to Finance Committee on the 3rd of September, or the version that came, the group figures that came to Council last week. So.
Okay. I note that there's an amendment to the resolution that will be put on the screen, and this is just to fit in with audit office requirements, as I understand it. That's fine. Sorry? The Local Government Act. Right. Thank you. Now, councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Vanders.
There's been some confusion regarding debt that belongs in the DCC core and debt that belongs in the DCC group of companies. Is it your understanding that the current DCC DCHL company's debt is in the region of $691 million?
As at the end of June?
The end of this financial year, 2019.
Yes.
So that's the total group debt, which includes obviously the monies that's borrowed on behalf of the DCC.
And in addition to that, that the core debt is $219 million.
For the council on its own, yes. But that's included as part of the 691 on the basis that we borrow from Dunedin City Treasury.
Right. So is it understood then that the City Council is liable for and raises the debt through Dunedin City Treasury Limited for the companies?
Borrowing is in the name of Dunedin City Treasury. That's who borrows the money on behalf of the group.
Right. And that we, as the shareholders of both the companies and the DCC, are ultimately liable for all of that debt.
Yeah, the key word is ultimately, but yes, yeah.
Right. And in terms of projections, which don't seem to appear curiously here, is it not also true that the budgeted projections for this debt are planned to go up by roughly $100 million every one of the next 3 years?
Councillor, can I remind you that we're talking about the Dunedin City Council annual report, not the companies. So it's not reasonable to be asking a lot of questions about the company situation unless it directly impacts on the Dunedin City Council report.
I believe, Your Worship,
please restrict your questions to the the annual report.
I believe, Your Worship, that it does impact on us very directly. First of all, because...
No, you don't need to explain it. I'm just, what you think, I'm just saying please restrict your questions to the annual report. That's what we're here for.
I believe, Your Worship, that I'm here to ensure that the debt position of this city is accurately
Do you have any further
represented.
questions?
I'll reserve my comments for debate
Sure,
later.
but if you've got any more questions, you're welcome to ask them. Any other questions? Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question for Mr Tang. On page 18 of our report, the issue credit rating, it says AA stable A-1+. Can you give me an indication of what other sort of entities have that sort of credit rating?
If I may, that question is for management to respond to rather than me, the auditor.
Yeah, I have a summary here of other councils, only councils that have ratings, and compared to what they were in October 18, there's about 25 councils on this summary schedule. Most of them have AA minus, AA stable, AA positive. So any particular council, I'm not sure this might have to be confidential, so I can't go into too much detail.
No, I understand that's a pretty strong credit rating that we have, and in fact, I understand it could be better than even some of the national banks in the country.
Just looking at other councils, there's not many better than us. Some are on the same level and some are weaker. But yeah, we don't stand out as being by any means not strong.
So we stand out in essentially the top percentile of...
Yeah, the top level, yeah.
Yep, no,
Yep.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councillor Vandevers.
Why is it in the DCC annual report specifically that we have not got, in 190 pages of information, a clear historical graph of DCC debt showing, for instance, how the stadium debt has been bounced from the DCC to DCHL and then part of it bounced back into DCC books again, therefore entwining both sets of company and DCC core debt? Why is it that we do not have a clear graph showing people what has actually happened with the DCC debt?
Okay, just a quick summary. The annual report itself is really looking at the 12 months ended June 2019. What we do have in other sections of the annual report is a 5-6 year trend. Now, it's not a graph, they're numbers, but on page 9 of the annual report, which is page 17 of 198, there's a 6-year trend of term loans at the bottom. Now, that doesn't include any narrative around whether the stadium debt's been included in one year or not the other year. Oh, that's group debt, sorry, on page 17. So you can see group debt on page 17. And term loans for councils on the previous page.
So what you're saying, in fact, is that there is no easily identifiable method reading this report to show how, for instance, the stadium debt has been bounced between DCC and DCHL.
There's no trail of where that
And just to finish that question, I believe that it's currently $30 million of stadium debt that sits in DCC debt figures. Is that correct? Thank you.
It becomes difficult to determine that because it's bundled into DCC debt, or because we have a single amount of debt, and because, as you've been made aware, debt now for DCC, including stadium, is almost $20 million less than it was 9 years ago. It's very difficult to argue which bit of which debt did we pay off the Chinese garden, did we pay off the stadium. What is clear is that when the review of the stadium was done, and council was put a clear report about moving the $30 million across to the council and leaving the remaining 99, I think it was at that point in time, now 87 or something, with the stadium property company. And all of that was well canvassed in the public domain at the time, so it certainly wasn't a secret.
Councillor Lord.
Yeah, look, I just had a couple of questions. One of them was, and it's perhaps a question I'd like, if it's appropriate for Mr. Tan to answer, but it was in the long-term plan, when we set our agenda for the year, we planned to spend about $80 million in the CapEx. I think it was, low 80s, 68 was it? We then lifted that figure midway through the year because we're ahead on our CapEx, and we ended up overspending the amount, and we ended up spending 101. For you as an auditor, I mean, not that it's a problem, but is that a positive thing that we perhaps catching up on CapEx, or have you got an opinion about that?
That's the one occasion, I think, when exceeding your budget is a good thing, because historically the council has a mountain of backlog in asset renewal and maintenance, and for that reason, I look upon that expenditure exceeding budget as a good thing. So there's still some residual catch-up to do. Hopefully that will be erased in no time in the future. So all said and done, it provides certainty to the quality of your infrastructure assets, making sure that you're able to maintain the levels of service as planned going forward.
The other question I had, Mr. Toombs, was would you like to make a comment when we talk about the company debt at 500 odd million? Can you tell us what the asset value of the companies is if, for example, they were all to be sold and the debt paid back?
Sorry, the assets?
The value of the companies, yeah.
The assets. Asset value. I'd have to refer to the balance sheet in the annual report. I think
It was
1.35
billion.
4 billion, yeah.
1.35 billion for the companies. Just for the companies, is that what you're referring to?
Yep, that's what I was asking here. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Vance.
Mr. Tan, in previous audits, it has been highlighted that we were well behind with stormwater replacement infrastructure, and that we had a very high proportion of stormwater pipelines in poor or very poor condition. You're aware of that, but are you also aware that there is no mention of that in the current report?
I'm not quite sure, Councillor, what the focus of your question is, but in terms of your assets, in terms of the quality of your assets, preparatory work, as I understood it, is being done to get a final sense of where they are placed. The council has, in the last 12 to 18 months, from the work that we've done, confirmed that a number of new people have been hired, so that there is that program of works that could be handled to address the infrastructure concerns that you may be referring to.
Okay. Are you aware of the Water New Zealand survey, which was released in March 2019, that shows that Dunedin has by far the highest proportion of stormwater pipelines assessed to be in poor or very poor condition, and this is across the whole country?
Yeah, we ourselves have commented on that, and our
In
colleagues...
the past, but not in this, not in this
Well,
report.
I haven't got that information, and I think that's a question more for management to deal with. I'm looking at your financials and how they impact the financial results based on the spend that you guys have spent in the prior 12 months.
Okay, so you've noted it in the past,
Yep.
but you haven't noted it this time because you believe that they are starting to look at that now.
Well, we will be including in the report, and we have discussed with management that there's still some progress to be made in improving asset management planning and the renewals program and the maintenance program. It's not quite finished, but a lot of progress has been made since we raised this concern a few years ago.
Okay, and do we have a finalised, signed-off written report at this stage, or are we still in the verbal draft phase?
The interim report has some comment on it that's finalised, yes.
So we have an interim report, but not a final one signed off.
The final report will be more on your audit on the numbers. The interim report to council, that's where you find our recommendations on the state of your asset management planning.
Thank you for clarifying.
Any further questions? Councillor Gary.
Mr Tan, based on the report, would it be your view that Dunedin City Council is being fiscally responsible?
There's more than a 10-cent question, I think. The question around prudence is one where you got to refer to your benchmarks, your financial benchmarks. We are not in a position to comment on whether they're prudent or not. We're just reporting against what we found and the facts that's based on our audit evidence. So the benchmarks speak for themselves. Whether they're prudent or not, that's in the report. That's provided in the explanations that supports the statement of service performance. Say, for example, your rate increases, is it against the benchmark that you set yourselves? Does it exceed the limit? That's all in the benchmark reports.
Thank you.
No further questions. Would someone like to move the resolutions? Moves Councillor Staines, second to Councillor Wiley. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Staines?
Thank you, Worship. In the time that I've been on council, I can remember when getting a final report was tortuous, and I wouldn't have wanted to be the auditors in those days. The systems at council were such that our audit reports often contained comment on areas of concern. Those days have passed. We're not perfect, but we are much further down the path of being an organisation that has the systems in place that enable an audit to be done and an audit report to be presented that, in general, does not have headlines saying we are failing to manage our finances. And those were things that were appearing, risks that we had of theft and all sorts of other areas. Those have been addressed. So in moving this report, I'm pleased that we are now having reports from our auditors that are clean, that have suggestions for improvement, but don't have red lines in them that say this needs to be fixed at the extent they had when I first got onto council. Thank you.
Speakers, Councillor Vanders.
I accept that the auditor's report is satisfactory to the auditor, but do not take comfort in it because of the extremely narrow view that an auditor's report takes. In terms of anything having a red line under it, having been here longer than most councillors, there was never a red line put under the tens of millions that were lost in some division extravagances. There was never a red line put underneath the millions of dollars lost in missing cars. there was never a red line put under the contracts for cleaning mud tanks that were paid and no mud tanks were cleaned. The auditor is simply not in a position to be able to look at those value considerations. I accept that staff have done a good job of making sure that all the numbers add up and that the numbers amount to less than what the limits are. This despite the fact that we've routinely pushed those limits skyward, with very little, I believe, to show for it since the stadium. So I can accept that the auditor has done a comprehensive job within the narrow scope that he has, but do not take any comfort, as others around this table would like to, that we are in good financial shape, that we have been getting good value for our rates, or even that we have a sustainable debt level moving forward, and I'm talking about the group level on this occasion. The absence of a clear debt graph and 190 pages of report, to me, is unforgivable. It's a graph that I've called for, I think, just about every year that I've been on the council, and we had them in the past. Often the graphs were contracted in terms of the vertical axis to make them look less ugly. Often the graphs were contracted in terms of time to make it look like everything's reasonably okay and things have always been this way. In fact, they're not. We are now looking at liability for the entire group debt, and this annual report only shows less than a quarter of it, the bit that we're allowed to talk about today. Take comfort all you like. I believe we need much closer scrutiny of our financial situation. I believe that we have been remiss in not having sufficient scrutiny of the major debt-creating operations of our companies, and that all of this will have to be addressed by a new council in a way which is not going to be comforting at all. The reason I will not be voting to note this report is not because I believe the numbers are inaccurate, but because the numbers are inscrutable and spread through 190 pages with no clear graphic representation of what's presented. Thank you for hearing me out.
Councillor Wilson.
Your Worship, thank you. Some people may want to look at a half-empty glass, but I think the important thing here is, and I appreciate the words of Councillor Staines talking about where we once were, and I'd like to thank both Councillor Lord and Councillor Hall for their work, and Susie Johnson and the other names on the Audit and Risk Finance Committee, because it is that layer that gives me great comfort that the very issues that Councillor van der Vis has just talked about are unlikely ever to happen again. I'd also like to, or the concerns and problems, they do a great work. And I'd also like to thank the, both staff members up there for their work on presenting really good financial information that is very clear and logical to us, which we're given at any time we request it, which also shows that the assets of the city are in very fine fettle. Yes, there are debt, but that has to be balanced against the assets of the city and how livable it is because we've invested in wisely. So thank you very much for what again is a clean report, which is something that we strived for early on and couldn't get there, but thank you.
Councillor Lord.
Yeah, I would just like to say there's some highlights in this year as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not wanting to get into a big argument about the group debt, but I note, I can't remember the figure off the top of my head from when I came to council in 2013, but I see here in the graph we had $219 million worth of debt in 2014. It went up to $238 million the next year when we took $30 million back from the stadium. Then we went to $216 million through paying back money at different places. Then it went to $202 million. Last year it was $200 million, and this year it's climbed up again to $218 million. So we're more or less the same place we were when I came to council 6 years ago. One of the differences that I see, this last year we spent $101 million on capital expenditure. I think when I came to council the first year, we might have spent about 25 or 24. So we're spending 4 times as much or 5 times as much on our capex, and we're doing things that need to be done, and it's equally remiss to not do those things and not have the debt. We could have less debt and not spend that money, but that would be as irresponsible as perhaps owning a power line company and not replacing poles and infrastructure, and we know that that didn't turn out well. So unfortunately, when you have a city that's running well, it doesn't mean that you have to borrow money and you have to do work, and it's exactly the same when you have companies as well. And if you don't spend money on your companies and on your city, you soon won't have a city. So I can support this.
Further speakers? Councillor Gary.
Your Worship, I want to focus on and mention the credit rating, which speaks volumes to me, and to also thank the staff for their clarity and their willingness to confirm and clarify any matters around financial issues. What I want to say is that there have been many calls on us to invest in the city over this triennium, and I'm really proud to be part of a council that has chosen to do that. And in order to invest in our city in so many meaningful ways, we have to spend money. That is just a fact. I believe we've been fiscally responsible and have carefully considered our decisions, and I think of a number of projects where we have spent money, and this is just a couple of the ones I want to touch on. The money that we've put towards place-based grants for communities, which actually helps our community at a grassroots level. The money that we have agreed to spend on the Peninsula Connection, a safety improvement project that has made a heck of a difference to the lives of people in that area in the wider city and provides amenity for our city and has connected our community. I recall my colleague, Councillor Lefiso, who inspires me every day around this council table, saying that she would be prepared to pay more in rates if it meant people in her community, in that community who are most vulnerable were assisted. And I think we should take heed of that particular sentiment. I'm proud of being part of this council that has made these decisions to the benefit of our people.
Further speakers? Well, I'll for my part, before handing back to Councillor Staines for his right of reply, just note that the purpose of an audit is to provide a professional and objective view of the situation. The purpose of an annual report is for it to be done according to accepted accounting practices and accepted explanations. And the point of a Standard & Poor's credit rating is to provide an objective assessment of the credit risk of an organisation. And I would rather take all of those than the scaremongering beat-up that's going on about the state of this council and its finances by apparently people who claim to be fiscally literate and frankly don't know the facts most of the time. Councillor Staines, your right of reply.
Thank you, Worship. You've just basically covered most of what I was going to say. I'll only just point out, though, many of us have a mortgage on our house. And it's not unusual to have a mortgage that is worth around between a third and a half of the value of your house. Apply that to the debt the city holds against the assets that the city holds, or the debt that the companies hold against the value of those companies, if we were to sell them, and it would be little different to having a mortgage on your house. So I believe there is scaremongering going on that is insinuating that this city is financially in serious trouble and could not pay off its debt. It can, and it can relatively easily. So I take that as a positive, and I am pleased that we have such a good audit report.
Thank you. I'm going to put this set of resolutions. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? No. You record Councillor Vanderbilt says no. Thank you. It's carried. Okay, on to item 9, delegations for the interregnum period. Thank you, gentlemen. Welcome, Ms Graham. So there's quite a lengthy explanation here, or the actual resolution is quite lengthy. Ms Graham, would you like to introduce this at all, or do you want to just go straight to questions?
I'm happy to go straight to questions.
Right. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Hawkins.
Happy.
Okay. Does anyone have a question? Okay. Just about off the hook, Sandy. Councillor Hawkins, do you wish to speak to this? Does anyone wish to speak to this? Who seconded? Councillor Elder. Well, since nobody wants to speak to it, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 10, notice of motion, public transport. Councillor Hawkins, this is your notice of motion. Do you have a seconder for this? Councillor Gary. Can I invite you to speak to it, Councillor Hawkins?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The question of who should run our bus service in the city has been a perennial one. At one point last term, if I recall correctly, we got to the point of both the Dunedin City Council and the Otago Regional Council agreeing in principle that it might be a good idea before they reviewed their regional public transport plan, and then everyone got cold feet and ran a mile from it. But the argument has largely been moot up until this point because through the Local Government Act and the Land Transport Management Act, it has been dictated that regional government takes a governance role over public transport. The scope for the transfer of this function will be enabled by the passage of the Local Government No. 2 Bill, a catchy title for a piece of legislation, but effectively that will allow, upon mutual agreement, the transfer of a range of services, of which public transport is one of them. And I'd like to thank the government for listening to the persistent advocacy, not just of this council, but other metropolitan councils around the country who are equally interested in having the option of their territorial authority governing their service, their public transport service. I'm asking for the support of council today to take this up in principle. It isn't a question of detail, that will come later. The legislation requires a full and formal public process, as you would imagine, around a decision of such significance, and any final decision would be subject to that. But it's a question, I think, that hinges on two things. One is our integrated transport network, or our integrated transport strategy, and the other one for me really is around democracy. At the moment we have an ambitious strategy for the future of transport in the city, encouraging public and active transport where possible. That's a key part of that. With a growing population and too many people still relying on having to drive everywhere, that's only going to get more important for us. But it's really hard to balance the competing needs of the network and the ambitions of the city to be more socially inclusive and environmentally friendly when you have different councils controlling different parts. So we control roads and footpaths and cycleways. We're in charge of putting the bus stops in, but we don't get to choose where they go. While the regional council govern our public transport, we're in charge of parking, obviously, and all of those different elements interact when you're trying to support and encourage mode shift, but it's very difficult to do that when the responsibility for those are spread across different councils. We can have input. And obviously the routes, frequency, priority and price of our bus service is central to how attractive an alternative it will be. Now, under the current system, we can have input, we can make submissions to the Regional Council, we can form a joint committee or joint subcommittee under the Local Government Act, but we will always be ultimately a minority voice in that decision making, and that's where democracy comes in. The Otago Regional Council was made up of 12 elected members. Only 6 of them represent the Dunedin ward, and let's say one of the Molyneux reps out of the 2 to take in Mosgiel. You'd need all of them to be on side and to get the votes to increase significant investment in our bus network, which is what we need to happen if it's ever going to be as efficient and affordable as we need it to be. Governance isn't the only barrier Oh, sorry, I'm not speaking to this. Governance isn't the only barrier to making things more efficient and affordable. The public transport operating model is another one, and so I've made it clear in the resolution that we need to continue to work with both NZTA and LGNZ and others to reform that. PTOM actively works against making public transport more affordable by entrenching the user pays model, and has other significant issues around lowest bidder contracts, which drive down wages for drivers, and we've seen what that does around the country, particularly in Wellington. Of course, the Dunedin City Council, being an accredited living wage employer, would mean that we would make sure that our bus drivers as contractors were paid a living wage were we to be governing a public transport service. A fine and final reason to support this motion. Apologies for bringing it to this meeting, largely ceremonial as it's supposed to be, but the timing of this, I thought, given the imminent passage of the legislation and the third part of this motion, which asks for the Regional Council to consider this specifically in their review, forthcoming review of the Regional Public Transport Plan, meant that it was better to bring it to this council at this point rather than wait for the incoming council, so that we can hopefully start to have this conversation at a time that is convenient for our friends in regional government, the incoming lot of them anyway. Thank you.
Okay, now just to clarify the process, I'm happy, this is a notice of motion, so naturally there isn't a staff report, never is with notices of motion, but I still want to allow questions for clarity. So questions can be asked of the mover or staff for that matter, but they need to be through the chair. And so I'll invite questions and then go to discussion as we normally would. So Councillor Van der Vis, did you have a question or do you want to speak to it? Okay, well, I'll just hold fire, and it may be there's no questions and we can go straight to that. So, question. Councillor O'Malley.
It's just confirmation that you can't change the wording of a notice of motion, right? So, yeah, cool.
Any further questions? Councillor Wiley.
Your Worship, can I get... I just want to get an update from Councillor Hawkins on point 3 again and get better clarity about the legislation going through government and the importance of doing this now.
Not 100% sure what the question is, but if the question is when is it likely to, it's up to third reading in the parliamentary stage, and our expectation is that it will pass its third reading in the October sitting block, so imminent between now and the end of this month.
So I guess I'm trying to get, you explained that you wanted this to pass at this meeting rather than the meeting of the next council. And I want clarity on why would that be an advantage?
No further questions? All right, Councillor Van der Vis, you wish to speak to us.
Councillor Hawkins made some very good arguments, including democracy, integration, joint committee, and the different elements that interact in terms of our transportation system. All of these arguments sit very strongly as arguments for a unitary council. And they are... I'm not a boy, thank you, and I'd appreciate no further interjections if you don't mind. All of these arguments sit very well with a unitary council, and the points are well made also in terms of transportation, except that this particular motion supports in principle only the public transport aspect of transportation. It doesn't address Port Otago. It doesn't address all the other aspects of transportation integration, which in fact would only really be sorted with a unitary council. In terms of this particular motion supporting in principle a transfer, when we have no idea what the repercussions of this transfer might be, we have no information available regarding what it might do to our rates, whether or not we would get more or less subsidy from the government from this enormously expensive exercise. But what we do know for certain is that the ORC have the experience, the expertise, and the contracting history for running buses all of which we have none of. We sold our bus system that many years ago that we no longer have in council all the experience required to actually carry out what this motion proposes in the way of a transfer. For this reason alone, trying to support a transfer for which we have no conception whatsoever what the consequences will be, and which we have no in-house expertise to run, and which in fact, to make it run properly, we would probably have to get or convince a whole chunk of ORC staff to come and join us, which comes back to the issue of unitary council again. If we are to do transportation properly, the piecemeal taking of bits of transportation responsibility from the ORC is not the way to do it. If we are to have a motion that proposes supporting in principle the transport of public transport governance to our organisation, the appropriate way to do that is in the next triennium to ensure that we get a staff report first that actually gives us some reason to know whether or not this transfer may actually be in the interests of our ratepayers or not. The number of reasons that I've listed that fly in the face of this particular motion, I believe are almost unprecedented. It fails on every count of knowing what this motion actually will do, of only taking part of the transportation liability from the ORC, but still giving them the rest, of questioning the democratic process, I think quite rightly questioning the democratic process of the ORC, but pretending that perhaps by some magic we are able to do better what they have struggled to do for many, many years, and what they are actually very keen for us to take over, because it is such a vexed and difficult area to take over. For all of these reasons, I ask you all to seriously consider voting against this a vastly premature motion for which you have been given no reasons and no information to vote for.
Further speakers. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Bishop. I will be voting for this. And before I speak my part, I want to acknowledge actually Jean Cotham, who's in the public gallery, for the help that she's given me over the last year or two in understanding the legal positions that we have as a council. Certainly the Local Government Act has been one barrier, the other one being the Land Transport Management Act, and the Local Government Amendment Act number 2 is hopefully supposed to address this, but whether it does or not will be a matter of seeing it. The regional public transport plan I don't think is going to actually be going out to public consultation until the start of the year now. It was originally suggested for November, but it's been moved on. I do actually think this is a relevant thing about whether or not we end up controlling this whole entity, and that is the Connecting Dunedin group has been quite useful in trying to deal with many authorities in one road controlling area. But it doesn't make much sense to have this aspect of transport across 2 authorities. It makes more sense for it to be sitting in us. It sits inside our geographical area. The original change in the Land Transport Management Act was really where authority was handed to regional councils, was territorial authorities that shared one transport system across a number of authorities, and the only way to stop them bickering was to give it to the regional authority. It never ever impacted us in that way, so we were caught up in a fix for Auckland, which then they fixed themselves again by forming a unitary council. I want to clarify something about the unitary council concept. If Dunedin was to form a unitary council, it doesn't get to take in all of Otago. It just says that the territorial area of Dunedin would act as a territorial authority, as a unitary council. That would mean that the Port of Otago would still remain in the ownership of the remaining ORC ownership. So we wouldn't be getting Port Otago out of that. We also have more than one activity of transport in the city that's never going to be in our control. We have the rail system that's run by Kiwi Rail, and the state highways are run by NZTA. But this, public transport, it's an integral part of our forward planning, and it makes sense that we end up having it under our control. So I support very much wholeheartedly the idea that we go forward with this in the next triennium, and I hope it comes up in front of Council quickly once we get the new Council formed. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for those who have just delegated me a job. And I feel slightly guilty today because I'm not actually going to. I'm going to abstain from voting for this, and not because I don't necessarily support it, but and I don't want to give up my job as a DCC councillor until my job is done. But I'm hoping by Saturday I may have a conflict, and therefore I don't want anyone to misconstrue my abstention as not being supportive in any other regard.
Councillor Staines.
Thank you, Worship. In reading the resolution, I see it's supports in principle. Supports in principle indicates that we want to look into it. We want to understand what the implications are. I'm assuming this, but we want to understand what the implications are before we make a final decision. If I remember rightly, this council, and certainly the council before, have wanted to take over the running of the bus services. The cities around the world, most cities, run their own public transport systems. They may contract it to contractors, but they run the system. And the community in Dunedin has repeatedly told us that they would rather have us managing those services than the ORC. In fact, we usually get them coming to our annual plan to complain about the poor service when it happens to them, thinking that, in fact, we do run it. So I certainly support this in principle. I think when we know the full facts, we can put those before our ratepayers and ask them again, do you still wish us to pursue this? But I think at the end of the day, my reading of the signal so far would be that our community would be prepared to pay a little more to get a better service. And certainly as a city, we would be able to achieve some of our goals in terms of carbon reduction, even solve some of our parking problems if we had a good public transport system that our residents supported. So I will be supporting these resolutions.
Councillor Lord.
When I read the motion as it says there, and I listened to what Councillor Stone said, but I also listened to Councillor Vandervist, and I see it says supports in principle the transfer of public transport governance to the Dunedin district. That doesn't sound to me like it's something that's negotiable. It sounds like as long as they're willing, this would get us over the line, and I can't support that for a number of reasons. One, it's the end of a triennium and we don't know how many of us will be here next week. The other thing is that we haven't, as Councillor Vandervist said, had a report. I've got no idea what the cost is, but I've heard many times around this table that we should take over the buses and we should put more money in. And I always get a concern, that's a shout, Dougie. I always have a concern that when people say that it'll come out of general rates, and in the absence of a report saying any different to that, I can't support it, because you could have a farmer at Hyde paying $300 a year for bus services where the average ratepayer in Dunedin pays $30 extra. What might seem like $1 a week on someone's rates is quite different on the way the general rate works. So I can't support this for that reason, because there's just not enough information for me to know.
To the speakers, Councillor Wiley and then Councillor Gary.
I'm very much in the camp of Councillor Lord and Councillor Vandervist. I hope Councillor Hawkins will inform me of why the timing of this is important. He said he would do in the right of reply, and I'm struggling to think why are we doing this at this meeting. That's what I'm really wondering. Some of this I could support at another time, but at this meeting, at the last meeting of the triennium, with a new council coming in and being elected on Saturday, I believe this is something for a new council to tackle and deal with. Some of us may be here, some of us may not be here. I think we've all got a good vibe on what the city wants with public transport going forward, but I'm sorry, I can't support this in the current, as we are sitting here today.
Councillor Gary.
If ever there was a matter, an issue that comes up and up again, this is one. Over the last 12 years, this is the common thread throughout from the community, that the community wants us to be running the bus service. Now, I supported this by seconding the motion because it says in principle, and that was the key for me. The community has reiterated time and time again they want a better bus service, they want us to have control of it, they want an efficient and affordable bus service, and no more than recently when we've been looking at trying to limit our carbon and go to a zero carbon city in 2030, this to me is a key. This is a key to our public transport. It's a key to getting people out of cars that can. And making space for those who can't. And for the people in our outlying communities, this is absolutely pivotal. So I see this as an opportunity rather than anything else. It's an opportunity to start a conversation. It does not commit us to anything. It's an opportunity that is very timely.
Further speakers. Councillor Leofiso.
Your Worship, I'd like to record my thanks to the mover and seconder and also to my colleagues who have spoken in favour of this motion. For me, this is about our strategic framework. Whether or not some of us are going to be in this council next week or whatever is irrelevant to me because of our strategic direction. Primarily for me, from my perspective, it's from our social well-being strategy in terms of, again, taking care of those people who cannot afford even to take the buses and take their children to Moana. So, you know, the references in previous debates to democracy, for me, our democracy is broken, and I'm going to say the N-word, and I mean neoliberal economic policies, which have destroyed and disrupted community and whānau life and basically munted our country. And so, you know, when people are talking about symptomatic things like rates and debt and stuff like that, there's a failure of imagination to say that we have to fix this model. It's broken, so we have to do out-of-the-box thinking. So I support this primarily because it's about strategic well-being of our people. And when I think of the residents in Brockville or in South Dunedin or Corstorphine, they're always talking about the buses and how the routes don't serve them and they can't afford the fares. Kia ora.
The speakers? Well, for my part, I can support this. I note, as several other speakers have, that it is in principle, but I also think it's a change whose time has come. At a recent meeting of the metro sector of LGNZ, there was a unanimous resolution passed asking government to allow responsibility for public transport to be transferred from regional councils to other agencies, and in addition, that the PTOM system, the public transport operating model, be changed for fear that if territorial authorities took over responsibility but they had to work under the yoke of the PTOM system, they would be even less likely to be successful than the regional councils have been, and they haven't been. But I need to note that it was acknowledged that the situation will be different in different jurisdictions. For instance, in Christchurch and Wellington, you have a number of territorial authorities, so that the public transport system serves. So you've got Christchurch City, you've got Waimakariri, you've got Selwyn, to name just a couple or three. And in Wellington, you've got the two huts, Porirua and Kapiti. And so you would need to have a different model in any case in those areas, and that has been acknowledged. But what is also acknowledged right around the country, every metro expressed the same opinion. It's not working for them now, and it has to be changed if we're going to serve our communities better. So I think, and I agree with Councillor O'Malley, I'm not sure how much the changes in the local government number 2 bill, whatever it's called, will facilitate this, but I don't believe we should be just sitting and waiting for it to happen to us. I think we need to be proactive and seeking the outcomes we want. So I can support it. So Councillor Hawkins, your right of reply.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just address a couple of things that have come up. One is around timing. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that the intention of this isn't some nefarious scheme to slide this in at the last meeting. The intention of this is that the passage of the legislation is imminent that will enable us to have this conversation. And the review of the Regional Public Transport Plan, which is a natural point to be able to have that conversation, is also pending. I mean, we don't have a meeting schedule, we don't have a council, let alone a meeting schedule for the incoming council, so I have no more knowledge than anyone else when the next opportunity might be for the incoming council to consider it. So it seemed more appropriate to bring it to this meeting to get that underway. I'm asking for the support of council in principle, and those principles for me are around our integrated transport planning and around our democratic capacity for governing something that is wholly contained within our territorial boundary. This is the first step in any process that may eventually happen. It would go through the legislation sets out as drafted that it would still need to go through a full and formal special consultative process where all of the pros and cons and financial implications of any alternative would be put to our community, and they would come back to us and say yes or no, we support this, and that would inform any final decision both at the DCC or at the Regional Council. But what we do know is that there is a growing appetite for us to be more ambitious around public transport in the city, and that was illustrated for me in the feedback we got during the last annual plan around the suggestion for an inner-city bus loop or to use council funds or parking revenue to subsidise bus fares, and overwhelming support for both of those, which I found surprising, to be honest. It's been raised that the Regional Council currently have the experience and the staff capacity to do it, and I don't question that, and that's a good point. I do want to make it clear that this is not intended in any way as a slight on what is happening, of the direction that our public transport system is going in. There have been marked improvements in the delivery of our public transport system under the last Regional Public Transport Plan, and I thank our colleagues at the ORC for supporting that. But I just think, for the reasons outlined, that it is a far better fit here within the City Council and within our own the planning of our broader transport network as we drive both our ambitions around social wellbeing and inclusion in our community and our ambitious goals around being a net zero carbon city by 2030, which will not happen without being far more ambitious around the delivery of public transport, which is currently a bus service in Dunedin City. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to put it and we'll take it by division.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Aye.
Councillor Elder. Aye. Councillor Gary.
Aye.
Councillor Hall. Aye. Councillor Hawkins. Aye. Councillor Lefiso. Aye. Councillor Lord. Aye. Councillor O'Malley. Aye. Councillor Staines.
Aye.
Councillor Steedman.
Aye.
Councillor Vandervis. Aye. Councillor Wiley. Aye. Councillor Wilson, abstention. Your Worship.
Aye.
Carried 9-4 with 1 abstention.
Thank you. Okay, on to item 11, which is the acknowledgement of retiring community board members, and I'd like to note the amendment to the term of service of Norma Emerson in the notes that we've got. Apparently it was incorrect in the first instance and has been corrected. That's right. And I note that Christine Neal is here and would like to speak, and so I will invite her in just a moment. I think the process we'll go through is we will have this moved and seconded, and then I'll invite Christine up to speak. So would someone like to move this? Councillor Steedman, second Councillor Hall. Okay, in the first instance I'll invite Christine, if you'd like to come up here.
Well, Your Honour, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Christine Neal, and I've been on the Otago Peninsula Community Board for the last 6 years. And have enjoyed my time immensely on the community board. And what I've enjoyed most was all the variety of things that we had to deal with. Some of them I knew a lot about, some of them I knew very little. But however, it was a massive learning curve, and I think I contributed in my own way. I do thank the board for putting up with me, and I have so enjoyed working with them. Our major thing that we have worked on is the road widening, and I'd like to thank the council for progressing on with that. That road widening of Portobello Road and further down is just going to make such a huge difference to the safety on that road. Already we're starting to get huge tour buses that in the new parts that have been done, they can actually drive round the bends without having to go onto the other, use half of the other side of the road just to get round. So that's going to be absolutely wonderful when it's all done. And I will say that the Peninsula people have adjusted to all the stop-goes. They moaned a bit when it first started, but my comment was to them, well, yes, it's going to be a right pain when it's going on, but it's going to be fabulous when it's done. And the bits that they have done are just wonderful. So thank you to the council for continuing with that. And I look forward to seeing the Company Bay to Broad Bay bit done. I would like to thank Councillor Wiley as our DCC rep, coming to our meetings. He's been quite invaluable to have and has really looked after us in that. So thank you, Andrew. I would also like to thank, I've rung in a lot, and I would like to thank the people at the customer service. They have been they couldn't be more helpful. If I was perhaps looking for somebody, who do I need to talk to? And they'd give me whoever, and if you don't have any joy with that one, try this one. And I would like to give them a plug. In immediate staff, I would particularly like to mention Richard Saunders. Now, he was, I don't know what his handle was, but he would come to our meetings as also directly from the DCC. He was excellent, and any job that we gave him to do, he would just get onto it. Can't speak highly enough about him. I also would like to mention Peter Maroney. I've had quite a bit to do with all recycling on the peninsula, and it has had and still does have its challenges. But any time that I've had any issues with that, all I have to do is give him a call and he gets onto it. So I'll put a plug in for him as well. I would like to talk about the late Pam Jordan. Now, Pam was our secretary, and what an absolute gem, and ultra efficient. We were just so blessed to have her. We also have a young lady called Lauren MacDonald, who is our secretary now. She hasn't been with us very long, but by Jove's, is she a good little lass as well? So I'm putting a plug in for her. I would just like to say that I consider that it's been a privilege to be on the community board, and I would like to thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you. Now, councillors, the resolutions have been moved and seconded, so can I invite anyone who wishes to speak to this? Councillor Wiley.
I actually didn't know Christine was going to be here today, but Paul Pope and I talked earlier, and I just wanted to pass on the thanks from the Peninsula Community Board for the work that Christine has done. She's only done 2 terms on the Peninsula Community Board, but she's been active in the community out there for 50 plus years. I think it started right back with the kindergartens and maybe even prior to that. Is that right, Christine? Yeah. So when you think of Christine, you think of someone who's passionate, engaged, connected, community-focused, and a real person, real people person. The gravel roads have always been under scrutiny out on the peninsula, and she's kept a good eye on them. She touched on the recycling and the work she did around that and got that accomplished. The only problem with losing Christine off the community board is that we missed the date loaf. So we're going to have to make sure that she actually ensures there's a fresh baked date loaf every time for the next meetings. But we wish her well for retirement and her next 6 weeks with Sam as they tour around the North Island. Thank you, Christine.
Councillor Gary.
It was my pleasure to be board chair when Christine was elected onto the board. And I just want to note her long and dedicated service to the Otago Peninsula Community Board and to the community. And most definitely, Christine, you have made a positive contribution to the community. Your perseverance around the recycling, which wasn't easy, your looking after the back bays, which was the area that I gave you to look after and feed back as the conduit for that area. You did an outstanding job with that. You were never afraid to disagree, which is always great, to have somebody with another perspective, not afraid to put it forward. And hard work, second to none. Nothing was ever a problem, and your great local knowledge was a great asset to the board. So you can be sure you have made a contribution to the community, and it is greatly valued, and we thank you for it.
Any further speakers? Councillor Lord.
I'd just like to make a comment on the 2 community boards I've served on this last year. In Mosgiel, we've got Sarah Davey Neatis and Morris Prendergast have resigned. I think Morris would have had another run, but his wife found his form and he got threatened with the old people's home. Sarah did what I consider quite an honourable thing, made a decision that she was going to stand for one thing or the other, so she stood for council, so I wish her good luck with that. And then for the Strathtorrey, I don't think I can mention, I can't let Councillor Wiley refer to Christine Neal's date loaf, which I'm open to receiving one to see if they're as good, but Joan Wilson for the Strathtorrey Community Board, who's been there for 21 years, is absolute magnificent cook, and I think around this building, the staff that leave this council to go to the Strathtorrey Community Board's meetings speak very highly of the afternoon teas that Joan provides. And also just mention Jacinda Stevenson and Norm Emerson have just served 1 term each, but they've been helpful and useful too.
Councillor O'Malley.
And I would like to acknowledge Richard Russell's service to the Waikato Coast Community Board. Richard's been, you might call him the voice of reason. Everybody has a different name for everybody else on that community board. And he's not the cook. In fact, the person who brings us our food is Manny Mayhem Bullock, who brings lollies, and we all leave in a sugar rush by the end of the night. But no, Richard has done a great job, and he'll be missed, and maybe I'll be on the board again, depending on whatever happens. Thank you very much.
Any further speakers? Councillor Gary. Oh.
Sorry, Your Worship, may I speak again? Because I thought we were just dealing with one person. Is that possible? I have others I'd like to acknowledge, if I may. I wanted to refer to Sarah Davey Neatis. Sarah has been board chair, and Sarah's work as a community advocate has been second to none. She was held up as an exemplar at the national body for the work that she has done. I also want to mention Norma Emerson, who I consider to be courageous and being prepared to stand up for what is right. It wasn't easy, but I acknowledge that stand that she took. And also Ryan Jones and Steve Walker. Ryan was the youngest elected member in the country, and it's been my privilege to mentor him, and it was a real privilege to get him onto the national body of community boards, where he did an outstanding job. He really added value to that and was a strong, considered voice for community boards. And it's a real point of pride that he's got his dream job in the government in housing, which is what he studied. And finally, Steve Walker, who was board chair when I was board chair at the community board on the peninsula. He has led the West Harbour Community Board with integrity and commitment. He was a great colleague to work with, particularly around the time when we went to the Local Government Commission with an appeal. He's prepared to stand up for what is right, not what is easy. I held his work up too as an exemplar at national body. I want to pay tribute to his passion, his professionalism as a community board member, and he will be a loss. And he was actually acknowledged at one of our community board conference for his work in the community at a national level, and that was a point of real pride to see a colleague acknowledged in that way. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to echo on behalf of the West Harbour community the comments that have been made already. It has been pointed out that Ryan Jones was our country's youngest elected member at the time, which was fantastic news for the community board because it meant that we had someone to run the Facebook page. Because as we all know, one of the single most important functions of a young elected member is doubling as the IT help desk. Ryan's greatest achievement was in presenting a platform for us to celebrate community service in the West Harbour through the Community Champion Awards, which were handed out over the past 2 years. There's no shortage of people coming to speak to us at Public Forum, but this was a chance to thank people who were just getting on with it and making it a great place for us to be. And so I thank him for giving us the opportunity to be able to do that and wish him well for a productive life in the public service. I went through most of my Steve Walker eulogy at the last meeting because I didn't realise this was coming, but I would like just to add to that in a context wider than transport. I think the effectiveness of a community board to a large extent hinges upon the strength of the board chair and their ability to work positively and constructively with staff and other government agencies as an advocate on behalf of their community. And Steve has done a fine job of this, whether it's council departments like Parks and Reserves or Transport, or more challenging combatants like Kiwi Rail or the Transport Agency or Port Otago. The Transport Agency projects in particular have required a great degree of patience on behalf of the community, and in less diplomatic hands could have turned into far more septic issues locally, and I think the fact that they haven't in the West Harbour is a credit to Steve's leadership. You're never going to die wondering what Mr Walker's thinking, and his frank assessments have been of great use to me on both a personal and professional level over the years, and long may that continue. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Well, can I just endorse all of the comments that have all of the compliments that have been passed and all of the comments that have been made. I note that energetic chairs, particularly of community boards, but community boards members as well, if they're energetic, they do far more hours, far more work than they're ever remunerated for, and they put a tremendous amount into their communities. And so I take great pleasure in supporting this motion of thanks to those community board members who have given service and are now stepping down. Councillor Steadman, do you wish to... You moved this, as I recall. You want to speak? Okay, I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, on to item 12, acknowledgement of service of retiring members. And we know that councillors Steadman and Wilson are retiring. And this is an opportunity for them to say a few words, and an opportunity, of course, for others to say a few words about them. I note that there's a certificate being presented to each of you. I can't give you that until we've passed the resolution, I'm afraid, so we'll just have to wait until you've spoken and other people have spoken and we've passed the resolution. So I am going to move from the chair that council, the resolution on the order books, that we record our sincere thanks and extend our appreciation. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Benson Pope. Thank you. And we will, however, take the valedictory addresses and the comments from the other councillors as the discussion to that resolution. So can I now invite Who's going first? Councillor Steadman, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Forgive me if I get a bit emotional. Try not to. Thanks, Mike. That'll give me a bit of humour there. I've written it down in big words. Right, so here's my final speech.
Don't believe it for a moment.
A man of few words. Thank you to the good people that voted me to be one of the representatives of the community. Sorry. It means a lot. Shit. I wasn't going to do this. Unfortunately, due to business commitments, which changed sometime after being elected, I decided not to run again, though this doesn't mean I won't be involved in the community and other roles that allow surf life saving, stuff like that, and filling sandbags. Or hopefully not sandbags, actually, to be fair. Thank you to Bridget, my children, family and friends for your unwavering support. Thank you to the staff at Council who have assisted me throughout and managed to solve issues behind the scenes, of which I've had many wins for our community. The ODT won't know about these ones, so they won't have reported on them. That's okay. Thank you to Councillor Benson Pope for your guidance. It's ironic that I sat here beside an old teacher of mine and he's filled that role again at this table, so thank you. Not sure. Councillor Marie Laufesia, she's going to get mentioned here. A special lady who is a true representative of her community, of which I want to be as well. And again, I heard that passion when she spoke of the public transport system in relation to her people. So, awesome lady, thank you. And it's been a pleasure to be around this table with you. Thank you to His Worship for his tenure as Mayor. I certainly believe he has done a magnificent job in trying to maintain a cohesive council and quite often against some divisive and negative personalities during his terms. So well done there, Your Worship. I wish all my colleagues here and other candidates all the best in their endeavours around this council table. It's not an easy job, there's a lot to take on, but I wish you all the best. And lastly, and with a bit of my humour, which some of you will possibly not miss, I wonder if someone wants this. Thank you once again. It's been an absolute pleasure. Cheers.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Can I invite councillors to respond to Councillor Benson Pope? Do you wish to?
Well, it's a response to both Councillor Steadman and Councillor Wilson, but yes, I'll make it now if that's all right.
Right. Well, the way I'm intending to run this is that I'll allow, invite councillors to speak to Councillor Steadman's comments, and then I'll invite Councillor Wilson to speak and do the same again.
I'll speak after the other.
Oh, okay. Any other speakers? Well, I just want to express my appreciation of what you brought to the table, Councillor Steadman. I have enjoyed your blunt and sometimes mischievous good humour very much, and your frank way of approaching things and expressing yourself. Not that I've always agreed with it, but I really appreciate the way you have expressed it, and I think that you can hold your head up as to what you've contributed around this table, even though I appreciate that halfway through the term you took on business responsibilities that really demanded a lot more of you than you had expected to, but you still manfully rocked up and did your bit. So I thank you for that. Other speakers? Councillor Wilson, can I invite you to say a few things?
Kia ora. Thank you, Your Worship. This is the 21st century and I'm rather sick of the boring old stodgy way we do things around this council table, so I'm going to start by doing a PowerPoint presentation because it just seems we've got technology, why not use it? And as some of you know, I've taken a while getting here, savouring what a wonderful place we live in. Andrew, sorry, it wasn't about getting me moving, but it's been frankly brilliant. And Bike here was motivated by a number of things. I'm going to take you through a wee tiki tour, but some of it's going to be show and tell, some of it's going to be Pikachu. Kucha. Anyway, Kissing Gate Cafe. Usually people say thank you last, but I'm going to try and do it first so I don't have the tears. I'd like to thank family, friends and staff. First show and tell. They had to put up with a lot, especially in my first 2 terms, and I had to wear this. Unfortunately, Jim found me wearing it one day when he visited, but it was pretty hellish for them. Working with a councillor who was trying to run a cafe, and stadiums were the flavour of the month. But it was a wonderful way of getting to hear what people thought. And so, as much as I think being a councillor is a full-time occupation these days, making sure you're out and about and get to listen rather than to tell, I highly recommend it. Next slide. Many of you will recognise this photo. You wouldn't have a year ago. This year, many of you have heard of a treasure that you wouldn't have known about, but it is not the only unseen treasure in Dunedin, and I've seen some brilliant ones in the last 2 days. The city, in the last 12 years, has done much to ensure preservation of its built heritage in the urban area. But it has much it could do, both in the rural built heritage and the natural environment, working with landowners to protect, preserve and enhance. There's a real opportunity out there, and there are many, many treasures to be found if you go looking for them. I think there's some real work needed in that area. Next slide. For most of you, that is a road, it's a hill, it's a tough hill. This job has ruined my life. I go on holiday and look at the pavements, look at the gravel, that's a hill, and as a cyclist I don't like them either. But I think Doug and I, and probably Mike Ward and a few others, will see the corrugations there, and the maintenance of our roads is one that I can please ask you to carry on doing more efficiently and better than has been done. I think the rural services, despite me being around here for 12 years, I've failed in ensuring equitable services, and a lot of people don't feel like they get heard much, or get much out of their rates, but roading is certainly one of them. Timely repairs, please. But the other reason I put this in is a hill, and certainly it's hard work being a councillor, but please keep on working and trying to get to the top of the hill, because by God, the views at the top are brilliant. Next slide. Highlights. Those are the lowlights. There's only 2 of them, really. Where we have gone, and especially in the last 9 years, and credit to Metapora, to Edward, to all of the Runaka, thank you for being the pleasure of being on the Maori Participation Working Party. That's Puketeraki Marae. I was there this morning. Would have spent more time looking at it, but and got a better photo, but a farmer came along and wanted to talk to me about ORC issues. My time is over here is definitely done, but it was great to talk to Vince for half an hour. It was a nice break. Next slide. The other thing, now that is a beautiful view. It was at the top of the hill. And that isn't there for the view. It reminds me that that is the first spot that I took Paul Orders to, the day that his first day here, to be interviewed. And I've had the pleasure to appoint 3 amazing CEOs, 2 for the city, 1 for the Otago Museum, and that pleasure of working with not just great CEOs, but the staff under them. It's a pity the GSOs aren't here today, but to hear they've been fantastic to work with, especially. And the first 2 that hugged me when I became a councillor were Pam Jordan and Ginny. So remember them and thank them for everything they do to make our job and to keep us from making idiots of ourselves. They're fantastic staff. To the other staff who have delivered, and I listened to the Treasurer's report today. The fact that the staff and infrastructure are rolling this stuff out, it's not easy. They had a really hard task to turn those around, and Tom's sitting over there, Richard Saunders isn't. But the work that they have done to ramp that work up has just been fantastic, and congratulations to them. It's been a pleasure working with them all, and the outlook's bright. The 3rd thing that I'm most proud of is, and I wrote it in one of my brochures that I put out, is that we didn't have a roadmap, and the work that the Mayor, and I'd like to thank Councillor Staines, because I think he had a huge part of this in setting the strategic framework. Now, in 2010, things were interesting. There was a no-exit strategy. There were people saying they were going to leave town on the boundaries because of what was happening with the stadium, and the fact that around this table people worked together with staff to ensure that the future's looking really, really good. And we've got a roadmap, and it's really, really clear. Now, I went back to take this photo because I like the boundary photos, and then if you could look at that, I was aggrieved to see that signage is really, really important, and that actually is on the Waitaki boundary, and it says Clutha. So I think that in the last 24 hours it may have been fixed, but yeah, it's signage and comms is everything. So while we may get it right down here around this table, we have to keep on working to ensure that the message out to the community is the right one. Next, please. I stopped in at Blueskin Community Resilience. My messages, the next few slides are messages to the next council. Don't ever forget to keep on working with community. They will keep you grounded. They're a great bunch of people there, and they are where we need to be putting more emphasis, I think, to get the most out of the city. Next slide, please. Dream big. That just seemed to, I was going down North Road today, and that just seemed to be the message that telling me to say something. And I just wanted to share a dream big. I'm very, very proudly now a farmer, and I spent yesterday, my almost finishing point yesterday was at the Evansdale Cheese. You bike in the back of Cherry Farm, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I'd just like to give that family, Chris often talks about diversity, and the fact that we've got some beautiful product of the land. I couldn't bring you any of our sheep or our beef or lamb, sorry, and you wouldn't want lamb anyway, Chris. Today, but I give this as part of our celebrations later about a company that is doing so well and led the way with farm produce at our farmers' markets. Diversity is big in that. I also want to mention that Leslie, their service, because Leslie Dennison was on both Dunedin Rural Development and was Community Board Chair at the same time I was many moons ago. But please don't forget that the food that you get comes out of the paddocks of the farmers. The landscapes you get are often the landscapes from the farmers. And please, as I've said in the last few meetings, stop bagging them, stop and start listening to them and working with them, because I am concerned that we won't have a very good voice around this table for rural people. They are ratepayers just like everyone else around this table. Next slide, please. This is Smooth Cone. It's One Tree Hill, known locally. It's right at just below Folden Mar, actually. It's an outstanding point that you can see from a lot of places. I'd just like to thank our Mayor for being outstanding. It looks like one tree, but actually if you go up there, there's a whole lot of little ones underneath it, and they're being nurtured by that and protected by that. One big tree that's been there near on 100 years, it's a monument to the First World War soldiers. It has been an absolute pleasure serving with you. The change in 2010 and the way that we've been allowed to work collaboratively when motions are put, and to feel nurtured when things, just those odd texts or the phone calls that make life well when things might be rough. I'd just like to thank you for your leadership. Next, please. I got here today, thank goodness. I wish I'd got a flat tire, it might have been easier on you all. There is one table in this room. I just hope that we work as one. The word council is one. It's working together that will get the best results for the city, not dividing and not having egos. And I wish you all well in that role. And final slide is, indeed we do live in a great small city. Thank you, it's been a privilege.
Thank you, Your Worship. I hadn't intended to make any extensive comment today, aside from the obvious recognition of three respected colleagues we know are definitely leaving. On Sunday, though, at a birthday party for a 100-year-old, I had something of an epiphany, and I guess Sunday's not a bad day for such an event. sitting in our magnificent town hall listening to an organ gifted to the city, as a number of you also were, I thought how fortunate we are to have been graced by people who gave us what we have, such as Mr. Patterson, who bought that organ in the 20s for £17,000, and those who endowed our art collections, our museums and our gardens. And while acknowledging all those people and appreciating their generosity, I want to focus today on the people in this room, past and present, those who saw the importance of supporting that generosity, realised their responsibility and made the most of the opportunity offered. You see, the generosity of Mr. Patterson would have come to naught but for the restoration of that organ, and we should acknowledge Paul Hudson and Pam Jordan again for their role in that, just as the efforts of Richard Walls and his team ensured the preservation of the Regent Theatre. A generous gift from Eon Edgar certainly changed the use of the Edgar Centre, once a wool store, but the city did and continues to bear the bulk of those costs, as we know only too well. Council also established the precedent for heritage protection in Dunedin when it strengthened and restored the building in which we now sit, which was touted at the time for demolition, and saw the need to rebuild the Crown Clothing Building, bought the railway station for $1, knowing that the restoration was going to cost $10 million, and of course safeguarded the steel and sleepers of the Torrey Gorge Railway so that we have the attraction that exists today. It was this council too that supported the relocation of our wonderful art collection from Logan Park to the refurbished buildings in the Octagon, and that interestingly despite the opposition of the Mayor of the day and her deputy. The Shanghai relationship and Peter Chin, along with a generous contribution from the government of the day, gave us our stunning Chinese Scholars Garden. And more recently, council-led campaigns supported by most of us here have ensured the strengthening and full use of our historic courthouse and cemented the integrity of our central city by ensuring the new Dunedin Hospital remains in our heart. That's only a snapshot of what's happening in Dunedin, and it's imperfect, I'm sure, but it illustrates why we should say thank you to the doers, people who see what is needed and just get on with it. We're fortunate that such people always appear to be in the majority. Whoever sits in these chairs in the future will, I hope, have the same energy, the same perspective and the same wisdom as those we've seen in the past. That brings me, of course, to departing colleagues. To Conrad, thank you for your support and friendship and your sartorial splendour. My best wishes for the future, and I know you will make sure we keep alive your vision for the improvements to the Sinclair seafront. I'm sure you won't need any assistance in preparing your annual plan submissions on that and other matters, and I've especially appreciated your vision of what George Street can be, and thank you for that. To Kate certainly fits my definition of a doer for her part in the rail trail and many related initiatives, but I don't want to embarrass her unnecessarily in that regard, and I won't comment on the outrageous front page photo in the ODT this morning. Her most important contribution to our city, though, on top of the workload of a major committee, is in the tireless effort she applied to the refinement of our second-generation district plan and her thorough and professional stewardship of our hearings processes. Rules, after all, that protect our residents from the interference of others, and rules that safeguard the things that our community considers most important. I do know you'll all agree that the dedication and commitment of an hour or longer to get here and again to return from meetings is more than most of us would tolerate, and I observe that is only what we're aware of, not her own electorate activities in our most remote but appreciated extremity. Thank you to you both.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Kate. On my first day at council, I had no idea what I was doing. As a rabbit caught in the headlights, it was Kate that suggested maybe I should bring my agenda papers to the meeting. It was very thoughtful advice that I've followed ever since. Thank you for that, Kate. The first serious conversation I had with Kate was being told off. It was about skateboarding, which I had dared to have a public opinion on as a positive part of our transport network. Apologies to Councillor Benson-Pope, which disqualified me subsequently from sitting on any hearing considering the bylaw. It was also the first of many occasions where I've been grateful for her advice and experience. It wasn't done publicly. It was done with a genuine spirit of helping to get the best out of other people, which is a great and rare gift in the ambitious bear pit of politics. As all of us sitting around this table know, there is no job description for what it is that we're elected to do. I arrived as a loudmouthed activist. You can make up your own minds as to whether that's shifted or not, but I somehow had to shoehorn that energy into the process of council in order to be able to get things done. That education came from asking questions of people who knew more than me, who were many at that point, and taking my corrective advice when it was needed, as it occasionally was. Kate is an elected member of very strong values, and they were always brought to bear on her work as an elected member. One is working damn hard without the expectation of reward, today's front page being the notable exception. Another is the firm belief in the power of community to get things done, rather than leaving everything up to council or having council do things to communities. That was initially something that came up when we were looking at developing community facilities largely, but it's been picked up more broadly, I think, in how this council supports community development as a council through initiatives like the $300,000 a year we now put into supporting place-based groups in our community. But it's been slightly to the side of council, obviously, that we've worked together the most, losing months at a time and years off our collective lives in various basements and attics around the council building and the Octagon. We worked through the Herculean task of reviewing the city's district plan. And as easy it is for those who weren't involved in that process to criticise the outcomes, there are very few people who understand the time, energy and intellectual capacity that went into it. And for all three of those things, Councillor Wilson will be sadly missed from this chamber. Grappling with high-level strategic directions and the minutiae of rules and standards to come up with a future-focused planning document that meets the needs of current and future residents is a close to impossible task. To say nothing of the current requirement for decision makers to take account of both the operative and the proposed district plans. The mental gymnastics required to comprehend all of the moving parts is remarkable, a task Councillor Wilson has been known to tackle out loud, in real time, in occasionally bamboozling fashion. But it's always worth it when we get there. Better a mouth catching up with a brain than the other way around. Lastly, I'd like to thank Kate for the way that, and she mentioned this, that she's able to let her rural perspective influence her debate without dominating it. It was never about getting more for Middlemarch, but about, in an increasingly parochial age, and an increasingly parochial urban-rural divide, it was about letting the lived experience of a farming family in this city be present in the work that we do, in the debates that we have, and the decisions that we make. Long may it continue to be present in local government. Thanks.
For the speakers, Councillor Lord.
I possibly wouldn't have been around this table if I hadn't been invited to stand for council by Kate. I figured you'd be thinking that way, and I was interested to note that I'm not the only one that gets told off by Kate. I thought it was just me. I've been told off more times than I care to remember by Kate, but recently I will just relate a wee story about Kate, and it's the other side of her telling off. So recently I came out of a council meeting here, and it was a committee meeting next door, and I went downstairs, and I won't say who I was walking to because I don't want to embarrass Councillor Wiley, but we were walking down the stairs, and he said, "Boy, you must have put a bug under Kate. She's really cross with you." And I said, "Oh, I didn't think so." And he says, "Oh, you put your hand up 3 times to second motions, and she just outrightly refused to look at you." I said, "Oh, no." I said, "No, she's not cross with me." He said, "Yes, she is." I said, "I can tell you this, if Kate is cross with me, you know about it, and it's not because she doesn't see you in a meeting." And I subsequently made the comment to Kate, and she had a good laugh about it. But the one thing about Kate, and I do wish you very well with your run for the regional council, whatever else you might do in your life. But I just would say this, that the one thing about Kate is if she does get cross with you, she certainly doesn't hold a grudge. And she's probably one of those people that spends a lot more time worrying about you than being cross with you, because I can think of a number of times in my last few years when there's been things that might have been going on, and she knows about things and she will come and see and just check that you're all right, and I do appreciate it. I do appreciate what she's done for the farming community too. So good luck, and good luck, Conrad.
Gary.
I've known Kate for, I've just worked it out, around 25 years, and we first met on a different kind of governance board, and I remember being impressed by her then. It was quite some time till we met again. Kate's rural perspective has been absolutely invaluable, and reminding us to consider one of the outlying areas of our city that's very important and has a great deal to offer. I always could rely on you to remind us, Kate, and that was gratefully received. We haven't always agreed on everything, and that doesn't matter, because disagreeing has always been really respectful, and I've really appreciated that. You're a very deep thinker, Kate, with a very sharp mind, and it's always a considered perspective, but I love your sense of humour. That has been a really great thing to experience. But the thing I want to talk about in a moment, I want to just mention too appreciation of the way that you have chaired the Infrastructure Services Committee and the way that you have led that in relation to a number of projects. And I know how hard you worked on the 2GP. I've really appreciated you believing in me that I had something to offer as an RMA Commissioner, and that was gratefully received as well. But the thing I want to touch on is your kindness, Kate. I have so appreciated that. As the only woman that had been on council before, you have shown great support and kindness to your female colleagues. It's been behind the scenes, it's been quietly done, but it has been really appreciated. And that support has been just wonderful to have in helping us settle in. I want to acknowledge your family, because I know your husband is here today, to say that they can be immensely proud of the work that you have done on this council. And I want to wish you well. I do hope to see you on the ORC. I wish you well for that. But leave knowing you have made an outstanding contribution to this city. And it has been great to be a colleague.
Councillor Wiley.
Yeah, I've been told off by Kate as well. You quickly know about it, but yeah. You know what, we're losing two colleagues here in councillors, Stedman and Wilson, that really got out and got their hands dirty. They got involved in the community and they were active in the community boards. And to me, that is the strength of what councillors are about. It's not about what we do around this table all the time. It's what you do in your after hours. It's what you contribute to the community in other ways. Getting out there and getting your hands dirty and making a difference. And I think when I look at Councillor Stedman and talking to Scott Weatherall, you know what, he was a strong impact on their community board in the last 3 years. He was there anytime they needed him. He was here there happy to help. I know when I was out there filling sandbags one night, he was there, right there with me. He never said no. I still owe him 2 Emersons, but that's a different story. And I haven't forgotten, just in case. But Kate is the same principle. You know, they get in and they got their hands dirty. They actually got the job done. And they were really passionate about the communities. And I hope the people that replace them bring that same passion to the table. You will be missed. Thank you.
Councillor Elder.
Well, I've really enjoyed Kate's passions, and so she'll sit with me still into the future. When the subject of farming comes up, Kate will be whispering behind my ear. When the subject of cycling and cycle trails and the development of whatever comes in the future, Kate will be whispering in my ear. In fact, she's challenged me already a number of times. So I will cycle up to see you someday, Kate. Also, her contribution to the Central Otago Rail Trail and that whole rural and urban connection has been really, really important, and we want to make sure those connections actually happen. So I'll be there. You will be whispering to me, Kate. And the maintenance of rural roads and the farming community and the cares of the farming community, you will be with me, Kate. I will always remember you for that, and thank you for your advocacy in that direction. Conrad, your contribution has been really great, and as I emailed you, I'm going to miss your wit on council and your spark around that, and all the best for your future.
Councillor Staines.
Thank you, Worship. It's pretty hard to say goodbye to Kate. Kate and I started on council same time in 2007, and at that time we were all pretty green. We came into a council that hadn't seen much change in councillors for a number of years, and I can always remember we were called into the Chief Executive's office shortly after we had been elected, and told in no uncertain terms that councillors were just a nuisance and that we should learn to keep our mouths shut. I don't think any of us left the room feeling, well, we probably all left the room feeling stunned, but as it turns out, Kate has not listened to that advice and has made her voice clearly heard. And mention has been made that at times she tongs you up. In my role as Chair of Economic Development, I have been told in no uncertain terms that the rail trail is inside Dunedin City. And it was about time we started to promote it and get it featured in our publications. So, Kate, thank you for that. We are trying to do better. Kate's also someone who has a lot of strategic thinking. She has had a strong input, as has already been mentioned, into things like our spatial plan. As chair of hearings, she's had to deal with quite difficult situations and making decisions that affect, in many ways, the future of the city. So she has served incredibly well. And if I'm lucky enough to be re-elected, I'm going to really miss you.
Councillor Laufey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to acknowledge you both, Councillor Steadman and Councillor Wilson, and thank you very much for your kindness and collegiality and all the late night and early morning pickups, Kate. Thank you so much. It saved me bus fares or taxis or getting to these meetings on time in the mornings. I just want to reiterate everything that's been said, and as you were one of the newbies, Councillor Steadman, it was refreshing to have you here, and especially your preparedness to listen to perspectives that I brought that were somewhat maybe different to your own, and your kindness in trying to persuade me, say for example, to think about the wisdom, long-term strategic wisdom of investing in a bridge, a $20 million bridge, which I did appreciate, and that's possibly one of the reasons that I supported it, because I knew at the same time we would have to be doing other things in terms of lifting our performance in terms of caring for our most vulnerable residents. So thank you for that. And throughout the triennium, we started to really miss you, and we're going to really miss you. So kia ora for that. And Kate, just your collegiality and your commitment and your passion, and although you came from a perspective of a rural community in whānau, you always kept the big picture in mind, and your care and passion for all of our city's residents, not just a certain sector. So I really appreciate that, and that's been a wonderful lesson, as well as just in general in terms of being a local female politician, and I'll always treasure that and have that in my heart for you. So thank you, and go well. So for both of you, I'd like to just relish my words with a little waiata. And I've been trying to think of which, there's two. One's in English and one's not in English, but I think I was thinking the one that's in English, and it's from the preamble of the American United Mine Workers Constitution, and it's by an ensemble called Sweet Honey in the Rock, and it does talk about unity and the importance of collegiality and, you know, having our spats, but actually keeping the big picture in mind. Step by step, the longest march can be won. Many stones to form an arch, singly none, and by union what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, singly none. Go well, both of you.
Kia ora. Any further speakers? Well, I'll just say a few words, and I'll probably be saying a few more about Kate when I speak my own valedictory, but can I just say that when I was the other leg of the tripod with Chris and Kate when we came onto council in 2007, and Kate's experience in community boards was hugely valuable in my very rapid learning about local government in general. And just to flesh out Chris's story a little, I was the other one in the room with the CEO at the time, and it was Kate who provoked him by suggesting that we might have a workshop where councillors could put forward their ideas about what they wanted to do, and the response was, good God, the last time we let councillors have ideas there was all sorts of trouble. So, and Kate, as Chris has said, has not let that hold her back from producing good ideas. And I should mention, I guess, her little nickname, which is Complicate. And sometimes I'd have to acknowledge that Kate's explained something about the fishhooks in something, and I thought, why is she going to that level of detail, and why is she worried about that? But eventually when you unpick it, you realise that actually there's a very, very good point being made, and the subtlety of her thinking has uncovered it. So thank you for that, Kate. You've contributed an enormous amount over the time that you've been on council, and you are going to be sorely missed. So if there are no further speakers, I'm going to put this resolution and then present the certificates. The resolution is in front of you. It has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against? Carried. And are there any abstentions? Good. We can say that it was carried unanimously because that's what's on the certificate. So, Conrad. Now, the next item is about me, so I'm not going to chair this part of it. Councillor Staines, the Deputy Mayor, is going to chair it. And so I'm going to hand over to him, but I do want to suggest that, given that we've been going for nearly 2 hours, we might want a short break before we resume, but that's up to... Right, so I'll leave it. I'll let you take over from here, and we can have that break if you wish. Right, so we'll have a 5-minute break, literally a 5-minute break.
Move it. I'll second it.
I'll move from the chair that we have a formal adjournment. Second to Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.
All right, councillors, I'll move that we resume the meeting, seconded by Councillor Hawkins. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So, just as we start this acknowledgement of service for our Mayor, I wish to put the motion that is in our papers, and Councillor Kate Wilson, I think appropriately, has offered to second it, as we are the 3 musketeers and we're about to become 1, maybe. So with that done, the process is I'm going to invite Mana Whenua to speak. Then from there, I'll invite the Mayor to speak, and then I'll open it up for all of us to have our say. So could I invite Mana Whenua to the microphone?
Tēnei Triennium. Ka tū mai ahau mātou ke mihi mera ke koutu katoa, huri noa, ki tēnei tangata, te rakatira. Te mohi hau, ki tō tautoko, ki ngā tautapa Māori, ki te tāpoi Māori, ki te tēnei tanga. Ko tautoko, ki te mahi, hei mō maharatanga, o te tiriti o Waitangi. Ko te Māori Participation Working Party. Ko tautoko, o te tahi mai, hei Wanganui, Hapori Māori, Arei te uru. Pai, o tākou, tākou mai. E tu e te hau. Ka tu mohi mai tau. Nā te mea. Ko hauri, ka haere koe. Ki tō whānau, i reira. Mai te tīmatatanga. O tō tūranga hei. Rakatira o mea. Tēnā hoki, o moka puna. Ko tipu ake rāwa. Hau, e te pepa, e te rei rā. Mai tō tainga mai ki te rei tūranga. Tērā, tētai te maiti ki tēnei tā, tērā te maiti tā, tētai atu, te maiti ki tēnei tā. You're one under one arm, one under the other. You couldn't do that now. Kai te mihi hoki, ki tō hoa wahine. Ko tō pautoka manawa, mai tō tūranga, hei mea. Heira. Ana, aku te kata. Anei hoki mātou, apa tipu. Oi. Rawaki ki a koe, he tohu pai. Mōhau. Tanga. Why? Firstly, to do community. Property.
To automotive auhi wero tau mai te Māori haumie huie tai.
E mai, e manene, i te reo rahiri, o te hui e, ngā tata mai, ngā piri e, ngā tino te here, o te whānau e, ko te whirika.
Tēnā. Tēnā.
I'm a little taken aback in responding. Kia ora. This is a privilege. Thank you. I knew this was coming, and this, for those of you who are not aware, will ultimately sit in the chain. It just needs the links made to signify the partnership between mana whenua, as has been said in this takiwā, and this council. And I will, when I speak in a moment or two, refer again to the partnership. But can I just say how much I've appreciated not just the support, the enlightenment and the friendship that has been offered to me as Mayor in interacting with the ngā runaka o Kaitahu in this takiwā. Cool. Thank you. Okay. Can I just express my appreciation of the support that the Waiata Group has given me through my time as Mayor. And for those of you who are not aware, they surprised me in my office just the other day and gave me a few numbers. And that they knew about. That's my favourite bilingual hymn. It's just knockout. So, I've come to the end of the most fulfilling decade of my working life. So far. We'll see what happens after this. And while there have been plenty of challenges, I can't overstate the privilege it has been to hold this position, and indeed how much I've learned from it, and from the numerous people around me to whom I owe most of the credit for the achievements over that time. This last term has been particularly satisfying as I and Council have been increasingly able to progress new meaningful projects and harness the community will to invest in both capital renewals and new initiatives. That was not the case when I started in this role. When I came into office as Mayor, I faced the daunting task of restoring faith and trust in Council following the bitter stadium debate that divided our community. Then, within months, we had the fiscal challenge brought about by the sudden shortfall in DCHL dividends. I, among others, had warned about just that possibility. and it only confirmed the loss of trust felt by so many in the community. So Council, as a result of that fiscal crisis, had to pull any discretionary budgetary items out of future budgets. There was no possibility of anything approaching a vanity project possible. Fortunately, things didn't stop completely. Lan Yuan, our beautiful Chinese garden, had just been completed, and the extensions to Toitu Settlers Museum and the upgrade of the Town Hall complex were well underway. They couldn't really be viably stopped. Had we curtailed those as well, the city would now be much poorer in terms of facilities and attractions. So I'm pleased we managed to maintain those. Nevertheless, we found ourselves faced with the conflicting goals of limiting rate rises and reducing debt simultaneously. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And Dunedin City Council has ultimately emerged from the experience much the better for it, ironically. Both the council-owned company governance structure and the council organisation itself have been overhauled comprehensively and are in much better shape than previously. And that is underscored by the council group holding a higher Standard & Poor's credit rating than any of the major banks, and council itself earning an A in the independently assessed Council Mark Excellence program, and I'm proud of both of those. And while the cupboard was nearly bare for several years in terms of council's ability to spend, we did achieve considerable fiscal gains. We kept rate rises well below what had been projected for some 5 or 6 years. In the first year, we achieved less than half of what had been projected, and we paid down debt, so that now council's debt, including what's remaining on the stadium, about 87 million as a matter of fact, is lower than when I started as mayor, that total. Now, we couldn't have done that without considerable efficiencies being found within council, but it's more than simple efficiency. The improved culture, professionalism, effectiveness and pride within DCC is also something I'm very proud of. And the credit for most of that must go to the 2 CEOs appointed in my time, Doctors Paul Orders and Sue Bidrose. They both faced monumental challenges and they both made an enormous difference. I can't speak highly enough of their professionalism and public service ethic. It's no surprise that Dr. Bidrose is widely regarded as among the best performing local government CEOs in the country. So thank you to both you and to Dr. Orders. During that time of austerity, when we couldn't spend any money, we developed our strategic framework. And that was brought to fruition in partnership with our community and has proved a wonderful guiding foundation and vision for the Dunedin community's ambitions going forward. And I consider that framework one of the council's major achievements during my time. And that was an aspiration I signalled in my 2010 mayoral campaign, that we needed a vision going forward about what our city looked like. It needed to be clarified, and I'm proud of that, and I'm proud also of our achievements around the city's built heritage, on the environment front, in achieving UNESCO Creative City of Literature status, and in the city's productive international relations, especially with our sister cities, Edinburgh and Shanghai. Our enhanced standing with cities significantly more influential than Dunedin has hugely benefited our creative sectors like film, design and computer gaming, and our tertiary and secondary education and medical research hubs. Now, I use the plural we, not the royal we, because despite the promises of some aspiring mayoral candidates, there is almost nothing a mayor can achieve on his or her own. I don't know even about the almost. Without a good consensus around the council table and without an effective executive, nothing can be achieved. So a huge thank you to councillors. The last long-term plan particularly is testament to active discussion and prioritising ahead of a solid consensus, a consensus that was ultimately shared by our community. And so a huge thank you to the community as well. And all of those in the community who submitted, shared ideas, asked for consideration and made suggestions, my observation is that our annual plan hearings have become progressively more positive and collegial over the past few years, and I'm pleased with that as well. In fact, I believe that a whole-of-city approach, whether that be partnering with community groups, the university, the Polytech, the Chamber of Commerce, Community Trust, Otago Museum, Malcolm Trust, United Way, Ngai Tahu, the list is a long one, but that has been critical to our success in so many areas and enterprises. So thank you sincerely to all those organisations, agencies, institutions and businesses who have walked with Council. We have, I believe, achieved a lot together. I've also learned so much over my 12 years on Council, and I want to acknowledge those who helped with that. It'd be fair to say that when I came onto Council, I was ignorant and green. That's with a small g, Councillor Lafiso. I stood with a disparate grouping who didn't know each other, but who felt there needed to be fresh blood on Council, and we called ourselves Greater Dunedin. Two of those, besides myself, Councillors Wilson and Staines, were also successful in that election. In the following two elections, we set ourselves the task of encouraging other quality candidates. We had no shared platform, simply principles which we agreed together. And we were successful first with Richard Thompson and Ginty McTavish, and then in 2013 with Councillor Lord. And I learned a tremendous amount from each and every one of them in quite different ways, and I'm very thankful for that. Thank you all. We made a significant difference for the better as a group. And at the risk of appearing to pick favourites, I acknowledge Ginty McTavish's contribution in my time, the councillor who has given the most in the best ways. Simply outstanding, and I want to acknowledge that. The subject I learned most about from a standing start, and which has obviously captured global concern, was climate change. And a number of people both around this table and further afield opened my eyes and brought me up to speed on that. Thank you all for that. And during the course of my mayoralty, the wide range of groups I've interacted with has led me to reflect deeply on Dunedin's origins, the individuals, the nationalities, the cultures that contributed to this place, and the values that motivated those early Dunedinites. I'm proud that our traditions of manaakitanga, of industry, of compassion for the underprivileged, of mercantile drive, women's emancipation, and so much more, I'm proud that they still inform and drive us today. And I appreciate the unsung contribution of the early Chinese to Dunedin. I've reforged bonds with the descendants of the Taranaki prisoners who built so much of our city's foundations. And I've been privileged to build a really warm relationship with mana whenua from our two local runaka, Puketaraki and Otako, and indeed not forgetting Moiraki up the coast. Those relationships and the collaboration that we have achieved have brought me to realise how the long journey to tino rangatiratanga actually includes all New Zealanders, albeit with different roles. I greatly value the support and friendship of ngā runaka o Kaitahu that has been afforded me. Ngā mihi. I acknowledge the solid, unstinting support of Deputy Mayor Chris Staines and his frequent sage advice. Chris was often a tempering influence when that was required, and I think we all benefited from that. Thank you to all the councillors who stepped into my place when I was called on or preoccupied with local government New Zealand business. And finally, a huge thank you to council staff for their various support, advice, guidance, information, and in many cases, just plain camaraderie and company. There are so many staff who have helped make my time here so enjoyable, and I won't single any out except for my support staff, Polly and Monique and Vivian. Just a stunning crew with whom I have so much fun. It's really, I really appreciate what you guys have, how you've acted and how you've worked with me. Thank you. Lastly, What I can say is that Dunedin is well served by extremely able and dedicated council staff across the board. And lastly, my most important thank you is to my wife, Joan. Joan has given me complete support, especially when expressing outrage at some particularly vile letter to the editor and the ODT over the breakfast table, and stoic acceptance of the many long periods I was absent in mind, if not in body, as the role consumed my time and attention. And thank you, Joan, for your wisdom in saying enough. That's it from me. I leave this role very proud to have had the privilege, enormously grateful to all those who held hands with me on the journey, and quietly confident that my contribution has left this place, Otipoti Dunedin, a little better for my being in this chair. Kia ora tātou.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's unusual enough to get the opportunity to speak at your own funeral, Your Worship, let alone stick around to hear the replies. But here we are, reflecting on your benevolent reign, Your Worship, over the last 9 years as we head into the Interregnum period. And you've escaped with your head, which is more than Charles could manage, although your next job may test that. Although I guess in that analogy that makes Dr. Bidrose our Oliver Cromwell figure, which is perhaps a fate even worse than that, but I digress. I've got plenty of more Caroline jokes for later. I've been thinking about the legacy that you leave, or the work that you have done. And I think the three most important things for me are things that you have touched on, but I think are worth reflecting on. And I think the first, and they are somewhat related, the first of it is about governance. And it's not as sexy as a stadium or a swimming pool, but it is the job, as easy as it is to forget that during the regulated period. And I think over the work that we have done in setting with our community the strategic direction for this council and for this city has been a remarkable achievement through economic development goals, our environmental ambitions, the social well-being and arts and culture strategies. It's taken the best part of a decade to get there, but I think it's a remarkable platform for future councils to build on, and I think it's gone some way to repairing the damage that you referred to in terms of the relationship between this council and this community. As a governor, I find the strategic framework an incredibly useful tool to have to guide our policy making and our budget investments. So thank you for your leadership there. The second is the outward-looking nature of the city, whether that's the UNESCO Creative Cities Network or Local Government New Zealand or our sister city relationships. I think it's more important than ever in an era of increasing retrenchment into protectionist or nationalist worldviews, that we stick together with our friends around the world and build relationships so that we can help each other tackle the great challenges of our time, because none of those will be solved by us individually. And on a personal note, I'd like to thank you for your support of my involvement in Local Government New Zealand, not just as a delegate of this council over the last 6 years, but in supporting the establishment of the Young Elected Members Network and my involvement in the organisation's governance and strategy advisory group. It's been a real privilege to be a part of that work and to help broaden the perspectives that are available to local government, and to see the sector shift towards a more future-focused way of thinking, the way that this council has. And I think both in your time on the National Council and ultimately as president of that, that's been incredibly helpful. Finally, most importantly, closer to home, I think the strengthening and deepening of the relationship between the city and Mana Whenua is something that wouldn't have been possible without the enthusiasm and support both of yourself and our Chief Executive. It's as welcome as it is overdue. And the wero for the incoming council, obviously, is to continue to build on that, to ensure that we have meaningful engagement from our local rūnaka in the discussions and decisions that are made by future councils. I'll leave this chapter of the hagiography there for others to pick up as they please. Good luck for the future. In the theatre business, we say break a leg, but all things considered, that seems a poor choice of phrase. So, good luck.
The city owes Mayor Kyle a great deal. He has put Dunedin on the map for the best possible reasons. What many Dunedinites might not know is what I witnessed is the fact that our current mayor is held in the highest regard, both nationally and internationally. At the recent Local Government New Zealand conference, it was clear that Mayor Kyle has brought great mana to our city. Local government leaders throughout the country, Māoridom, members of Parliament from all sides of the House, through to the Prime Minister, who said, "You've got my phone number, Dave," clearly have the greatest respect for our mayor. That was very evident, and it is not surprising that he was elected local government president, of which he has a further year in his term to serve. Internationally, from Edinburgh to Shanghai and beyond, through the UNESCO Cities of Literature, Mayor Kyle is held in the highest regard, and not just because he holds the title, but because of his personal qualities. He has most definitely upheld the mana of the office of mayor. I note his fair and firm chairing of meetings and his professional yet human approach to the role. Your support for professional development has always been appreciated, Dave. Your integrity and hard work is second to none. And I know that you care deeply about this city, and you have always been able to look at the big picture, to think globally and act locally, and encourage us to do the same. And you've led the city accordingly. While Dunedin has considerable challenges at the start of your tenure, so much has been achieved, and you leave our city in a good place with a bright future, albeit with new challenges. I have always felt well supported in my role as a councillor by you, and I especially want to note that when I experienced the most challenging time in my 12 years in local government, standing up for the women in the city around the issue of domestic violence, Mayor Kyle stood by me. I thank him most sincerely for that. And I thank you for entrusting delegated duties to me when you were taken away to Wellington with your Local Government New Zealand hat on at various times, and allowed me to grow as a councillor. Above all, you are compassionate and a kind human being. I have great admiration for the way you led our city through the aftermath of the terrible tragedy of the 15th of March. You were a mayor that we could be proud of. Such a role is not carried out without the support of family, and I want to acknowledge Joan and your grandchildren who are here today, and your wider family, for the support and sacrifice that they have made over the period you've been mayor. Your grandchildren can be extremely proud of the legacy you leave to the city. I wish you a happy and healthy retirement from this role, and more time to spend with your family. It is so well deserved. Kia ora, Dave.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First, I just want to say, you said the words ignorant and green with a small g. That was me back when we were campaigning, and good old Facebook. You can put any bullshit you want up there, really, and have a crack. And to be honest, I look back, you get those renewals come back of what you posted, and recently, because we're in that triennium period and it's election time, they come back and I'm looking at it going, oh my God, what a dick. Me, your worship. So people don't understand, like I remember having a crack at Councillor Wilson, we're having that battle over the cycleways and all that, and we had a meeting down at St Clair. And you're coming to an infrastructure meeting, whatever, that afternoon. I said, well, you must go back there and you must change it today. You must change it today. Having no idea there's a process, and it must be on papers, and there's a lot of preparation by the staff to actually get it there. So when you're out on the outside, you have absolutely no idea in reality of the process to actually get around the table and vote on papers and things like that. So I'm going to apologise for being a dick 3 years ago. There was some comments there I made, but not seeing the man who you are. You have been I think since 2010 you've probably been, I've learnt, as one has to do in life, you learn from your mistakes. and hopefully I have learnt, but you have been the person to lead this city. You've been the best person to lead this city, and well done, Joan, for supporting him. So, well done, and enjoy your time away from here. I recall a story when you got some dickhead that's walking behind you and he's got a placard and he's walking up right behind you, so you can basically see the placard looking over your top of your head. I know what I would have done in that situation. My old instincts would have come into play and he would have been down in the police station. I don't know what charge I would have done it as a non-sworn officer, but I'd have probably made something up. But, you know, to have the strength not to do anything, and probably I think Joan had something to do with it, I think. You know, and I've seen some of the people at this table have a crack at you. And there was one time there where I just sort of did chuckle. I was, you know, it got the better of you, but, you know, well done and congratulations. And it's been a pleasure working underneath you there. Thank you.
O'Malley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well, I remain ignorant. I would like to really comment on basically what goes on in this room, because one of the major roles that the Mayor plays is to bring together 15 disparate voices, or 14 in front of you, but obviously you're a contributing voice as well. And it's not always an easy day at the office, and it takes a special character and a special personality to allow order to exist when disorder might want to take control. I certainly have felt that when I've been able to speak here in this room that I have been given the respect and space that I need, and I think that that can be true for all of us who are here today, and that is a mark of the man that sits in the chair up there. I wish you well in your next endeavours, and I hope that you enjoy the next phase of your life as much as you've enjoyed this phase and as much as we've enjoyed having you as our Mayor. Thank you.
Wiley.
I think when you look at our city and you look at how people see our city, Dave has been that face of the city for the last 9 years. And even before I got to the council table, you could always see how well we were represented. It's going to be very different next time. A lot of different personalities, and whoever would be the mayor will be the mayor, but it'll be totally different. And I think what we've got to be here to celebrate the last 9 years of how we've been represented. We've been represented first class, top of the list. You know, you've done an A game. I even love the video of the gas exploration. That was pretty good.
Didn't charge enough.
I know you didn't charge it. But I think that's when you look at the role of the mayor. And you say Dunedin. And everybody you say Dunedin, who's the mayor, they can go Mayor Cole. And I think that is the mark that you will leave. And that's going to be the hardest mark for the next mayor, regardless. The commitment to the office, the workload, at 69, wow, that's pretty good. You know, we are going to have a different table, but thank you for leaving us with the table we've got today.
I'd just like to say thank you, Dave. I remember coming in and sitting in your office before I got elected and having a chat to you about, you know, I probably would never have stood as an independent by myself, except for the Greater Dunedin group. I just felt that there was a potential opportunity there, and perhaps it was other people who had some faith in me that I didn't have in myself. It's quite interesting. A lot of people have said to me in the last few months, why didn't you put your hand up for mayor? And I said, well, I can't do the job. And people say, what do you mean you can't do the job? And I say, if you sat around the table and saw the things that go on, and I know you have a chair's agenda and all that sort of a thing, but I said my brain could not keep up with the things that need to happen in this room to be a mayor. And I said, how you keep it all together, how you do the job, and I just sit there and I think it's absolutely laughable, some of the people that put their hand up for mayor and think that they have had no council experience and they think they can do this job. I don't believe there's any of them that would fit that category, and just ups to you. Good luck with your future. Not sure if Joan's hoping you get on the health board or not, but but I just hope that whatever you do, you enjoy. Thank you.
Elder.
Well, I like to have an image of you cycling on the Portobello cycleway and enjoying the scenery, because that is an amazing project and one of many that have been completed under your watch, talking about the upgrade of Toitu, the town hall, the Chinese garden and the stadium. Dunedin's amenity values are the envy of many a place. But what I kind of want to talk about is actually your personal values, in the sense of Dave had a monthly meeting with me and we sat down and talked about the issues that were arising, the visions and dreams I had and the visions and dreams the council had, and I just really appreciate your calm and wise manner. And calmness in really difficult situations. I can still remember in the first month when we were in council, the Aurora issue hit the fan, and Dave was very calm and that was nice. And I think that calm and wise influence has been really great for us. Your advice and support on a personal level, your ability to, when I make mistakes, say, oh, well, that wasn't the worst thing you could do, which is reassuring. He also said sometimes he made worse mistakes than me, where I don't think I can see them there. But I think that calm, patient and sort of gentle presence has been really great for the council. And has taken us through some really hard times, and I just want to thank you for that, and thank you for your mentoring and support on an individual level, because it's much valued.
Thank you. Kia ora, Mayor. It has been a privilege for the last 12 years, as I said earlier, to serve with you. I don't know what your parents knew when they christened you David Charles Cull, but you have been very much the face of the DCC for the last 9 years. Well done. Fortuitous as it was. And thank God they didn't call you Ian, and you might have stayed down there. Being the face of the city requires a huge amount of fortitude and toughness. What I've admired most is your ability just to switch off completely from the to doubt, to consider, but then to switch off from the naysayers and from the people that just don't want to understand. And you've been a rock to go and talk to about the city as we've gone forward, very clear in your direction, once you have considered it. And that has been gratefully received. I think you've been quite busy, but never once have you not returned a phone call that I've made. And you've always been available. And I'd just like to, Dave used to spend a whole lot of time at Terrace. We discussed who might stand for mayor from Greater Dunedin one day, and there was a toss-up, it was never going to be me, between Chris and Dave. And I have to say thank you, Chris, because there isn't an occasion to say thank you for being an absolutely fantastic deputy mayor, because it is a zing-a-zang, and you have restrained him at times, I think, from reacting another way. So has Sandy, in a different way. But thank you for always being available, for talking to us and reaching out and your approachability. I think that's been seen right throughout the city with the community groups that you've been involved in, and they've really appreciated that. Thank you for also having, I think it was your council meeting up in Middlemarch, the only one you had outside of this chamber, and prepared to do that and to go to the, and your regular going away out in the city to meet with people. But I was saying, sorry, they went to Terrace quite frequently, and Joan, thank you for giving up so much. I think you've done a lot of that by yourself. And for all families who have membership around here, it's a tough ask, but you really have been very, very generous. Thank you for letting Dave be the mayor and the president of the Local Government New Zealand, which has given us exposure as a city, which I'm very, very grateful for, because we wouldn't have got nearly as much notice otherwise. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Fiso.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Te mana whenua o tēnei rohe, tēnā koutou katoa, ka mihi nui aroha kia koutou mō tō manaakitanga me te aroha kia mātou kia tau iwi in this place. I'd just like to, for me, the personal is very much the familial and the political. So I just want to record my thanks from 3 years ago. At that time, Michael, my brother, had passed away, and I remember being at Araitiru Marae and having the Dunedin City Council delegation, if you will, come on to the marae to acknowledge Michael and Reitu and the whānau. And I just want to record publicly my thanks and my alofa on behalf of our family to thank you and Dr. Bidrose for your endless compassion for Michael and Reitu at that time. I don't know if many people know, but Dr. Bidrose stepped in and ensured that Michael's paid leave, which had run out in July, he passed away on August 30th. She ensured that Michael and his family were cared for, and that was very much in my mind when you came and acknowledged Michael as a staff member here, but also just that's what the chief, the rakatira, does to help ease that burden a little less. And I just want to thank you, and will always be to you as a whānau, Rose, and to you, your worship. And for me, that was also reflected and reiterated and echoed again, as other speakers have said, in your leadership, immediately following March 15th terrorist attacks in Christchurch. And again, I wish to record my deep personal thanks for your showing that leadership and compassion and care, because to me, that signal, that day, that act, those acts of murder of 51 people and injury of 40 or so more, to me that signalled a need for us to change the paradigm completely, and your response and the response of the staff and everyone else concerned to support and to awhi the bereaved and our whole community, Muslim community as well, feeling attacked. That signalled me a shift that I think will come stronger and stronger. So I just want to thank you and wish you well wherever you go and whatever mahi you're going to be doing next. But you've left behind a great legacy for us, as other speakers have said, to build on. Kia ora.
Councillor Van der Vis.
This is an ideal time for us to say sincerely what we think and to give thanks for the positive things that we've had and to acknowledge that they haven't always been positive. Mayor Cull, I have a number of things to thank you for, some of which may surprise you. One of them is the idea that optimists are generally happier people. And in that regard, my hat goes off to you, and I hope that this is actually true and that you are in fact a happier person. I have always recognised and recognise again now that you have been an exceptionally accomplished front man and that you have been a very skilled speech maker. Quite early on in 8 years ago, I think it was, I remember a situation where you were called upon, and I don't remember exactly how, but you suddenly had to make a speech at very short notice. You had less than 10 minutes, and I thought, how on earth is he going to do that? And nobody in the room thought it wasn't well prepared, and it was acceptable to everybody. So, acknowledgement there. The fact that we have disagreed on most council spending issues, I think, is a matter of record. And the fact that you have, most of the time at least, let me put my opposing view is also appreciated and acknowledged. You may not realise, actually, how much of a favour you've done me in allowing me to have so much time on my hobby farm, where, because my council duties have been low, I've been able to renew myself in a way that I wouldn't have been able to had I had a high council workload. I also wish to recognise that you're agreeing to a $50,000 settlement has been very handy for my campaign just now, which I've significantly underspent, and that the name recognition that you have afforded me may actually end up being one of my main positive attributes from this reasonably tough period as essentially your leader of the opposition. So thank you very much for being a real leader, albeit leading the council in a direction that I've often disagreed with. I accept that you have led it, and that this is what fundamentally a mayor needs to do. I appreciate that you have not found my attitude or my manner to your liking a lot of the time, and I apologise for unnecessarily upsetting you if that's been the case. I go with my own nature as you have with yours. So thank you very much for leading the council. Thank you very much for letting us all have this time to speak now. And I wish you the best and a happy optimist's future in the DHB or whatever else it is you hope to do in the future. Thank you.
There are no other speakers. I'll exercise my right of reply. Kia ora, Your Worship. It's clear from the comments that have been made by your colleagues around the table that you've provided exceptional service to both the City Council and to the city. Through both good times and bad, your leadership skills have enabled Council to deal with the hard issues and to set a strategic direction for the city that I'm sure will guide it towards being the great small city we all aspire to live in. On a personal note, I've enjoyed serving with you on council for the past 12 years and with Kate. I remember back in early 2007 when you called me to find out if I was going to run for council and to invite me to run with you and a few others. From there, Greater Dunedin was formed, and 3 of us were subsequently elected: yourself, myself, and Kate, the 3 Musketeers. I also remember the principles that we pledged to if we were elected. We would push for council to be future-focused, financially and environmentally responsible, and more transparent in its decision-making. I think you can be justly proud that you have remained true to these pledges. You are leaving a city that is in a much better shape than it was when you took office in 2010. As you've already mentioned, during your term, the city has developed a full suite of forward-facing strategies to guide decision-making. Financial management processes have been made more robust, including establishment of an audit and risk committee with skilled external members. And you've allowed the appointment of highly skilled directors to our council-owned companies, something that was sorely lacking. Not only has the city developed an environment strategy, it has declared a climate emergency, with budgets now in place to start addressing the issues of our carbon footprint and adaptation to the effects of climate change. Council meetings are televised, papers are available online, and there is a process to move confidential papers into the public domain as soon as the reason for confidentiality has passed. Transparency and greater opportunity for residents to have a say have become fundamental to this council's decision-making. These are not small things. These show great leadership. There's still plenty to do, and I know that you will be entrusting that to the council that is elected Saturday. But you can be proud that during your term as mayor, the city has taken a big step towards its vision of being one of the world's great small cities. You are a great leader. Your contribution has made a difference. Thank you, and thank you for having me as your wingman. I'll now put the motion by acclamation.
Back to me, I think. So we have reached, I believe, the end of the public part of this meeting. In a moment, we will go into non-public for one small item. In the meantime, those attending the farewell event in the art gallery can make their way over. Finally, I wish the incoming council and the mayor, whoever that turns out to be, all the very best for the next term. I believe there are both wonderful opportunities and serious challenges ahead. May your aspirations match those of our community. And now, if I could prevail upon Marapura or for Karakia to close, it would be most appreciative. I'll move from the chair that we move into non-public, as on the order paper. Second to Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And we'll just wait a few moments for the room to clear.
Take about 10.